Welcome to Keto Life Support, where we make your keto life sustainable, fun, and low stress. I'm Kim Howerton, and I'll be coming to you weekly with some of my keto besties to bring you the practical, real-world keto advice that you need. Quick disclaimer, I am not a doctor, and even if we do have a doctor in the house from time to time, he or she is not your doctor, and nothing we say on this show should be taken as medical advice. Always check in with a trusted medical professional about your own personal medical concerns.
Hello and welcome to Keto Life Support. This is Kim Howerton, and this is episode number 97. And today I'm going to be going into a discussion around a question that I got asked on my Q&A video. The question was, do you ever cheat? ? I think there were 4. I might have that number wrong, but it seemed like there were 4 if I remember. And I think this deserves a little discussion. So I've certainly talked about cheating in the past, but let's talk about it again. And so I'm definitely going to be repeating some concepts. But I thought, well, if somebody's asking this question, there are some of you that don't know the answer. So let's talk about it. To answer this question, we have to discuss the word cheat. Like I said, I've said this before, but I'll say it again. I do not associate with the word cheat. The word cheat is not in my chosen vocabulary. Now, do I occasionally fall into unconscious discussion or, use the word cheat? Sure. But I try to be careful to be more, responsible with my language than using the word cheat. Now, that's not to say that somebody who uses the word cheat is irresponsible. I'm simply saying that I have chosen to see cheat in a certain light, and it helps me keep it in its proper place by not misusing the word cheat. So what does the word cheating mean, or cheat, right? To cheat. So people cheat on their spouse. People cheat on their taxes. People cheat on their test. And all of those imply to get away with something, to do something out of their either moral or rule code. Like there are some rules set up, and then they act outside of those rules. But the word cheat would imply that they're doing it in such a way they're trying to get away with it. They're trying to act in a way that's out of their code of conduct and not suffer negative repercussions for it. Your body doesn't have a code like that, right? If you eat something, your body isn't like, oh, that's outside of our code, so demerit for you. No, our body just takes in food and then responds to the food we've taken in. So you just cannot cheat your body. You can't do it. It's always with you. You can't trick it. So I don't know how you would get an unfair advantage. You can't be like, look over there, and then eat the cheeseburger. Your body knows. So in that way, cheat doesn't really apply to the body. And then in the other way, eating things that don't fall into your approved rules around food probably is not giving you a lot of physical advantage. And if it's outside of your rules, for the most part, it's not even giving you a mental advantage because you might have negative feelings in response to what you did. And that's not an advantage either. So I just don't feel like the word cheat really applies in this spectrum of food things. I think we make food choices. The other reason that I don't like the word cheat in response to eating is because the word cheat has if we really get down to it, we do have to acknowledge that, we are the cause of all our actions. That should be obvious, hopefully. But there is a sort of victim-y quality to cheat in my mind. You might not have the same connotation, but I have it. Like, oh, I did a bad thing. I'm a bad person. I cheated. And it's just like, please, come on. Like, just own it. Just own your shit. Oh, just own your stuff and say, I made a choice. In hindsight, it may have not been a good choice, but I made a choice. So the first answer to this question is, I don't really even like the word cheat. but I know what this person meant. I assume I know what this person meant. What I infer from their question was, do you ever eat in a way that violates your food rules? And I can say at this time that answer is pretty much no. But I have a much wider opinion of what my food rules are these days. So let me talk about that a little bit. Oh, let me back up for a second. What this person may have meant is, do you ever eat in a way that's not keto, right? Or do you ever eat something that's high carb? I can't know exactly what they meant, but I'll answer all the questions that they may have meant that I can come up with. I assume they didn't mean like on my taxes. We're not going to discuss that on this podcast. A helpful concept here we've discussed on a previous episode is abstainers versus moderators. So abstainers are people that do better not even opening a door. Moderators can determine how far they open the door, and so they can moderate something, whereas abstainers, once they step off the path, they're sliding down the hill, so they better not even step off. And there's a related concept, which is having a fixed mindset versus having a flexible mindset. Fixed means, right, you can think it's fixed in place, not like fixed as in it was broken and now it's fixed. So fixed as in the opposite of flexible. And they tend to go together, right? People with fixed mindsets tend to be abstainers, and people with flexible mindsets tend to be better moderators. And it just so happens that keto, because it has a fairly defined set of rules around it, although you could argue that, but it's a more, tends to fall in line with people who are more fixed mindset and are more abstainers. And so it attracts people within this framework. And when I first started keto, I absolutely was in a fixed mindset, and I tend towards a fixed mindset. And so my first 2 years keto, I did not step off the path. I guarded my boundaries like, I don't even know. I don't even have an analogy for it at this point. I guarded my boundaries very strictly because I had a strong feeling that if I stepped off the path, if I ate something that wasn't quote unquote keto, I would take that as permission to continue to do so. But if I showed myself that I didn't have to do that, if I could stay on the straight and narrow, if I could, honor my self promises, that I could just continue, because I'd never done that before. My entire life, I'd made myself promises that I broke around food. And I talked about this in a previous podcast around promises, that it's very important to keep your own promises. So I had I had a mindset that said, I have to stay within these parameters. I knew that if I let myself see myself stepping outside of the parameters, if I gave myself that example of seeing myself do that, I would continue to do it. So I said, absolutely not. Now, did I have keto treats? Did I eat more of various keto type things? Absolutely. I'm not saying it was like meat and water, but I ate within what I considered my food rules. And then about 2 years into keto, I was like out to dinner with my family. And my family has, no one else in my family is keto, or even, you could argue a little bit low carb, but not strictly. And my extended family, we have this kind of rule. We would go out somewhere nice to eat, and we would order 2 or 3 desserts for the 6 or 7 of us. And we would just pass them around, and everyone would get a little bite. And we've done this since I was a kid. If I had wanted to order my own dessert, my parents, who were always very lovely about it, would let me. But it was just our family culture that we all wanted to try different things. So we'd order a couple of desserts, and nobody would eat an entire one. We'd all share. It's actually a very healthy habit for desserts compared to eating an entire dessert or 2, but I digress. So for 2 years or so when I was keto, when we go out to dinner, I would just pass the plate by me and not take a bite. And then about 2 years in, I was like, There's a panna cotta recipe on this. I would still read the dessert menu. I was very interested in the dessert menu. I just didn't eat the desserts. And I saw a recipe and I was like, aha, I think it was an orange cream panna cotta. And I thought, I think I can make a keto version of that. Can we order that? And so we ordered the orange cream panna cotta and I took 2 or 3 bites of it. And I got an idea of what it tastes like. And then I did. I created a keto version of it. I did not explode. I did not die. And I did not eat all of the desserts on the table. And I didn't eat more when I got home. And it didn't start a binge. And I was like, huh. So, okay, I can have a few bites of something when I go out with other people. That will now be included in my rules of what I allow. And so, did I cheat on keto? Well, technically, I ate something that wasn't keto, right? But I didn't do so in a way that I felt any negativity about. I felt like I was doing it in a constructive way. And little by little over the years, I've changed up my way of eating to suit the way my body seems to more positively respond to. And you could even argue these days that it would be hard to define the way that I eat as exactly keto at all times. But do I consider any of that cheating? No, I don't. Because what's ended up happening, strangely, over time is I have transitioned a bit from having such a fixed mindset. So the mindset that if I even bend a rule, I'm outside the bounds and now all hell will break loose. I trust myself to eat something that is unusual for me and it be an isolated event that does not lead to a binge. And so one of the things that I was trying so hard to avoid for so long was binging. And I define binging as any level of unconscious eating that is hard to stop. So it doesn't have to look like mountains and mountains of food, but it might look like, oh, I had that one bite of the panna cotta and then I got home and I ate a box of cookies or even 2 cookies. And then the next day I was like, well, I'm already eating the cookies. So I might as well have French toast for breakfast. And, one thing leads to another to another. It's just like dominoes. And I didn't feel like that was happening and I didn't feel at risk of that happening. And so I shifted slowly over time to allow my eating to include foods that are not strictly keto or even extremely low carb. And I also found simultaneously my body responded better to higher protein and slightly reduced fat. And then over time in an evolution, I found I tolerate a high vegetable intake very well. So I just over time shifted my food rules to reflect the way my body responded to food and also the way my brain responded to food in that I wasn't ending up knee deep in a binge. And so I've just made choices around food, conscious, mindful choices around food that at this time mean that I can eat really anything I want at any given time and not feel like it's cheating. It's simply a choice. Now, if I ate the way my inner 4-year-old wants me to eat, I would start to suffer negative repercussions because a diet of purely sugar is probably not what I want to be doing. So I absolutely have food rules around the way that I want to eat. I track my macros. I plan my macros. I know what my average weekly macros are going to be. I don't adjust them very much. I plan around special occasions. I allow myself to try something or eat something that's outside of the way that I normally eat. I plan for it if I'm going to do it. If I take a bite of something and it's not worth it, I stop eating it. I don't care that I planned for it. I don't eat food that isn't tasty, especially if it's what I call expensive, right? It takes up a lot of my budget. Some people would refer to that. If you've ever watched, do you ever watch that show, The Great British Bake Off? Mary Berry would say, well, no, is it Prue? Prue. Now, see, I'm getting my ladies of the British Bake Off confused. It's not worth the calories, or it was worth the calories. That's how she refers to it. I say, that's too expensive. I don't want that in my budget. And so if I take a bite of something and it's not up to my standards, I'm a no, and I stop eating it. So let's go back. So hopefully I answered this question, which is, do I ever cheat? Well, the first part of that answer is no, because I don't consider anything related to food cheating. I simply call it a choice. Do I ever eat outside of my food rules? At this time, no, because my food rules are now flexible instead of fixed, but they're always conscious choices, and I never feel like a victim to the way that I eat. But if you applied the rules I had 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago to the way I eat now, you would say, well, that's crazy. They're very discordant. You are definitely violating your food rules. But to me, food rules are meant to evolve over time to suit your current needs and situation. And what I'm always wanting to protect in terms of creating food rules is both the physical and the mental. Yes, indeed, the mental. So physical, what does that mean to me? Well, physical means that if I'm not wanting to weigh more, then I'm not weighing more, right? So that I'm either maintaining my weight, or if I want to still lose body fat, then they support maintenance or fat loss. And so those rules are very important to me, that I, on average, eat in a way that supports whatever type of phase I'm in, that I meet my nutritional needs, right? Am I getting enough protein? Am I feeling good? Is my digestion good? All those physical things. Then on the mental side, am I fixating too much around this food? Is this food causing me to binge? If I have this food in my house, am I going to be haunted by it and want to continually eat it, right? So it has to suit me mentally, and it has to suit me physically. So a lot of my sort of quote unquote out of the ordinary food choices might take place more in the context of a meal out or a vacation or something outside of the ordinary. I tend to shy away from keeping things in my house that call my name. Like I will not have don't listen to me say this if you're going to get triggered by a food description, but mint Milano cookies. They are not in my house. I do not have them in my house. I cannot have them through the door. I have a history of binging with those suckers. And so I still have certain rules around that. Now, if I ate a few of those on a cookie tray at a party, I wouldn't consider it cheating. I said, I decided to eat these. I ate those. Now I'm going home and they're not coming with me. And so over time, my mindset has really shifted from fixed, as in yes, no, black, white, to flexible. Does it work within my general rules? Can I make it work? Does it work with my lifestyle? If I choose this thing, if I choose to be able to include this thing, does it make my life work better, or does it make my life work worse, right? I am flexible around it. And just to back it up, one of the definitions of being a flexible mindset person that might help you to know the difference between fixed and flexible is a flexible mindset would say, if I say, no, you can never have this, you feel like you would rebel against that more. Versus if I say, no, I can never have this, it gives me a sense of security and calm, because if I were to have a little bit, I'd want a lot. Whereas in the flexible mindset, if you said, no, you can never have this, then you'd rebel. So it's like the opposite reactions. Does the restriction bring you comfort, or does it bring you rebellion? That is one of the defining features about the fixed versus the flexible. And while we tend to stay with what we are, as you can see here, you can transition over time. You can be a little different. One is not better than the other. What you are is what you are. Tall is not better than short, even if society has an opinion about which is more attractive, right? But data does show that people with flexible mindsets often have an easier time managing long-term weight loss. I think really honestly, because society is set up for flexible mindset people a little easier than fixed. As you can probably infer from some of the response of your family members when you say that you're keto and no, I don't eat that, right? It's like a square peg round hole. Flexible people fit a little bit better than fixed people. It doesn't mean that fixed people are wrong. So, to take it back to the original question about, do I ever cheat? I feel like I've answered that question, but let's talk about how this might apply to you. I would encourage you to investigate your use of the word cheat if you do indeed use that word. I think if you start calling it a choice, it takes back ownership of that word. I made a choice. You may have a judgment about the choice. You may have feelings about the choice. You may have decided it was not a beneficial choice, but it was a choice. And when you make one choice, you can make a different choice next time. So know why you have rules is the other part of this. So if you have rules around the way you eat, but you don't know why you have those rules, I'm not saying the rules are wrong. I'm saying it will be very helpful for you long term in maintaining those rules to understand why you have those rules. So if you say, I only eat things without any sugar in them. Well, okay, why? Well, one, and by the way, because sugar isn't keto and keto is better, it's not an answer. I mean, it's an answer, but it's not a good answer. No, why is it better? Better is a judgment. Why is it better? So, maybe it's, hey, I don't eat things with sugar in them because it helps me manage my blood sugar. And that helps me manage my blood sugar and my insulin. It helps me feel more clear-headed. I notice when I eat sugar, I don't feel very good, right? Like all those things. It's like, oh, I avoid things with sugar because of XYZ. And now you know, okay, that's a rule. Okay, so I have a food rule about sugar as an example. And if you're new to keto or when you were new to keto, somebody, myself maybe, might have told you, well, keto is 20 total carbs or less. That is a short and lazy answer. The longer and less lazy answer is most people, when they first start keto, find that 20 grams of total carbohydrates is a very safe carb limit because 99 point something percent of people will be in ketosis if they keep their carb limit under 20 total grams. That being said, depending on your muscle mass and activity level and genetics, you might find that your carb tolerance is higher than that. So you can define your own personal carb tolerance limit through testing and investigation. That is the actual accurate answer about the carb limit on keto, because keto is sticking to a carb limit that keeps you in ketosis. So where you set that carb limit rule, you could say, I am going to follow the general rule of keto that works for almost every person and stick to under 20 total carbs. But over time, if you're, say, a Olympic athlete, you might find that that doesn't work the best for you, and you might raise that number to 50. And you're still showing 3.4 millimolars of ketone, of beta hydroxybutyrate, right? So you're definitely in ketosis at that level. And then your rule is now a personalized rule rather than a general rule. I think general rules are great until you understand what works for you if that's different than the general rule. Generally speaking, to use the word generally 20 times in a paragraph, Rigid rules are applied to everybody, really are only good if you want to be the keto police, of which I used to be a member for sure, but since then I've grown. So, over time, your rules may shift to be more personalized, and that is right and appropriate. Or your rules may not shift because you found the original rules were exactly what you wanted and needed. That is also fine and good because you have personalized them in that you've confirmed that these are the rules that personally are right for you. Some of you were keto at 20 total carbs and later said, I'm going ketovore or carnivore, and my total carbs are way less than that. I have personalized it. That is well and good and right for you. So we can borrow general rules for a while. But if we don't make them personal rules after a while and either adjust them to work better for us or not because we've confirmed they're the right limits, if you're only applying other people's rules to yourself, invariably you will have a strong relationship with the word cheat, and your orientation will be around a sort of what I tend to look at as a parent-child relationship with your diet. I don't think that's any way to live long term. I think you have to take ownership and responsibility and personalize what works for you. And when you're the master of your own rules, you can't really cheat on them. You only make choices. You make choices, then you evaluate the choices, and you make another choice based on outcome of what you experienced from your choices. So I hope that answers the question in a roundabout way about whether I ever cheat on my diet. Now, in case I sounded like I was trying to tell you that I'm perfect, I am not. I probably shouldn't be afraid that you think that I am because I think it's fairly clear. Not. I have triggered myself. Sometimes I make choices and I look back and I think that was not as well entered into as that should have been. Or I'm not in a good mental space around that, and that was not as conscious as I wanted it to be. Or I feel less in control around my food than I want to today, and that is expressing itself. But they don't have to be big whoops, as we used to say. Do you remember that? Not whoops, whoop, big whoop. Is anyone else my age? No big whoop. They don't have to be a big deal, is what that means to those who don't speak 80s. It was a blip. It was a moment. It was a decision that you'd rather do differently next time. And the good news is you can choose to differently. And that happens to me regularly. So please don't think you have to be perfect at any of this. You just have to be an adult. I know it kind of sucks. I don't love adulting either, but that's the way life works. So I wish you all the best in your journey on this. If you want to talk about this cheating concept, I would love to hear about it. Come to Keto Life Support, the Facebook group, make a post. It is a group I will allow you in. It is there for you, and we'll talk about it some more. Let's have a discussion. Cheating. Do you like the word? Do you not like the word? What do you say? How do you handle it? Let's talk about all of it. So I hope that this was a little food for thought for you, and I hope you have a fabulous week, and I will talk to you soon.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Keto Life Support. Want more information? Want show notes? Want to suggest a topic? Just head over to ketolifesupport.com. That's where all that kind of thing can go on. By the way, I have a request. If you could go to your podcast host and hit subscribe, we would really, really appreciate it. And what would be even more awesome is if you could write a review. And what would be even more awesome than that is if you could write like a really flattering review. Just asking, you do you. All right. So thanks so much for joining us. I'm thrilled that you're part of the Keto fam. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.